Hello, we're going to be talking about committees. If you have your study guide out, you can look in Objective 3, and once we're done with this, or as you go along, you should be able to answer number 3 from Objective 3, number 5, 6, 7, and 8. The rest of the Objective 3 we should get to later in a different PowerPoint. There are a couple major functions of committees. The first one is legislation, and this is what we deal with most often because Congress, that's their job, is to write laws. Committees enable Congress to compartmentalize their workload, and subcommittees are where the bulk of the work is done on a bill. What does that mean? Well, remember that congressmen have all sorts of things they're doing. Yes, they're writing legislation, but they're also doing casework where they assist me and you as constituents. They are also traveling back and forth, and they're also working on bills and laws of their own. The committee allows them to really drill down into one or two or three specific areas, however many committees they're on. Subcommittees are where the bulk of the work is done on a bill, because remember from our flow chart on Friday that a bill will go to a committee and they can work on it, but those committee members might farm it out to a subcommittee, and that's where they'll actually do all the work. They'll have hearings, they'll bring in experts to testify about the bill and get as much information as possible, and then the subcommittee will bring a bill back to the full committee. So just remember that a subcommittee is where most of the work is done, and it really has to be that way because there could be thousands of bills in Congress, and so they have to really farm out the work. There are four main types of committees. This is going to be number 3 under Objective 3. So as we go, you can just jot those down. First up is the Standing Committee. This is the ones that are permanent. They go from Congress to Congress. When you did the scavenger hunt for Congress, you listed which Congress session this was in. So there are standing committees that have been around for many years, from the 100th Congress to our most current Congress, or session of Congress. They do not go away. Both House and Senate has permanent committees. And like we said in our flow chart, they're going to get their hands on every single piece of legislation. Everything is going to go to a standing committee. From there, it'll go to a subcommittee that the standing committee members have created, and that's where they'll do most of the work, and then the full committee will eventually vote on it. They're very specialized. Committee members are supposed to be experts at whatever it is their committee is. If it's agriculture, they're supposed to know agriculture. If it's environmental, they're supposed to know environmental issues. Not only will they look at legislation, they also have some oversight powers. They can call bureaucratic agents in for questioning. Some examples down there at the bottom: the House Ways and Means Committee. This is going to deal with money and revenue and taxes. All revenue bills have to start on the House side, so that is only a House thing. The Senate Judiciary Committee, they're in the news right now. As I'm preparing this, they're getting ready to have a vote on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. And we know, if you followed it all, they had the hearings and they listened to his accuser as well as testimony from the nominee himself. The House Rules Committee, like we said on Friday, this is the most important committee because they control the agenda. On the House side, it is once again only a House thing. And then the Senate Armed Services Commission, just another important committee on the Senate side. Once again, the House Rules Committee is only on the House side. There is not one like that on the Senate. On the Senate side, the leadership is supposed to work together, versus on the House side, where the majority party really gets to control everything. And as they control the Rules Committee, they get to set the agenda for debate and things like that. We talked about a conference committee on Friday. These come together to work out the differences between a bill. Because remember, a bill has to be passed by both the House and the Senate, and it has to be the exact same version. If they do not, then they'll bring members from the House together, members from the Senate together, will come together and work on this bill. Select committees can also be called special on the Senate. So the House Select Committee or the Senate Special Committee. Okay, so don't get confused if you see it as that. They are on both sides. So the House has select committees, the Senate has them. They do not combine efforts, so they're not going to be made up of both sides. And they are usually brought together for some kind of investigation. Alrighty. You see the examples there, the Watergate Committee, the Senate Select Committee on Unfair Campaign Practices. Both those were brought together to investigate certain issues. And then they can make recommendations, and sometimes those recommendations lead to reform. We have all kinds of campaign laws out there now. A lot of that came from the Select Committee's recommendations from the Senate. Joint committees. These are brought together by both sides, so they are made up of both House and Senate members, and they are created to complete a study or some kind of housekeeping role. Okay, you see the example on the PowerPoint here that the joint committee did the 9/11 Commission report. They came together, they put information out there, and they sent it out to the public. They're not going to send legislation. They're not going to look at legislation or anything like that. They're just made up to study and do that sort of stuff. They could be permanent, but usually they're going to be temporary. Which party comprises the committees and controls committee chairs? The majority party does. This is why it's so important to be the majority party, and why Democrats are working so hard trying to take back control of the House and the Senate, and why Republicans are trying to keep control of the House and the Senate. Because you control the committees, you control the committee chair. You're always going to have a majority on the committee. You're always going to have the committee chair. The ranking member of each committee, that is from the minority party, and if the majority party loses, then that person usually will become the committee chair. Why is it important to be committee chair? Well, they get to schedule, they get to say when we're going to debate things, they can create subcommittees, they can get rid of subcommittees. Basically, they're in charge of the committee. So we talked about the poison pill and pigeonholing. They can do that sort of stuff. If they want to get rid of a bill, they can table it and never talk about it. So they have a lot of power. How are committee chairs selected? The seniority system. You get on a committee, and if you are the longest serving member from the majority party on that committee, then you're usually going to be the committee chair. So if you've been in this committee for 20 years and the committee chair leaves or gets beat out or whatever it might be, then you would be the next up. You're not going to be a rookie House member or Senate member and come in and be the committee chair. It helps to also be from a safe district. A safe district is where there's very little competition for your seat, so you can make decisions that aren't going to affect you when it comes to run for re-election. Getting on a committee, three goals, and this is going to be on your study guide number 7 under objective 3. 3 things you're looking for when you're looking to get on a committee. You want credit claiming abilities, okay, which is going to help you get reelected. When we say credit claiming, that means you can say, hey, look what I did. Look what my committee did. So look at me, basically, okay. If you want influence in Congress, you want to be on the correct committees, and then a chance to make policy in areas that are important to you. Every congressman runs on something that's important to them, so they want to get on the committees that matter to them. If their big thing is urban development, they probably don't want to be on the agricultural committee. Okay. Why are representatives more concerned about committee assignments than senators? Because there's not much you can do on the House floor. So you have to be in the committees that are going to matter and be getting most of the legislation to make a difference. You can add amendments, but they can get voted down versus being in a committee where you can make changes, mark up a bill, and things like that. The second function that committees serve is oversight, and this should answer the question number 5 under Objective 3, what is meant by legislative oversight. This is where they watch the bureaucratic agencies. Okay, the process of monitoring the bureaucracy and how it's administering policy, and then a major check Congress can exercise over the executive branch. And we've talked about the bureaucracy. They can be called in by these committees and questioned. They can be questioned about the implementation of policy. They can be questioned about their actions. Remember the Hatch Act for the FBI director during the last election cycle. Any number of reasons they can be called in and questioned. And those answers could lead to a firing. It can lead to possible criminal charges. It can lead to decreasing your budget. Any number of things with these oversight hearings. How is it done? They hold hearings to investigate problems and possible wrongdoing of the executive branch. And they do this so they can see how a bill is being implemented. Now, the picture there is of baseball players. This was during the steroid era when, for some reason, Congress was getting involved in baseball, and all those guys were called in. You have the same rights as regular trial. A lot of those guys pleaded the fifth when they were asked questions about their steroid use. Okay, but oversight is an investigation, and they were investigating into the use of steroids in baseball. But that's what oversight is. You are investigating. Most important legislative power, they get to tax and spend. What can Congress do? They can exert pressure on executive agencies through budget issues. And that's what the second bullet says, is that they can cut the budgets if you're not doing what you're supposed to as a bureaucratic agency. And every bureaucratic agency wants their money. When you start talking about budget cuts, they start to snap to attention, and they will really listen to Congress when there's talk of losing their money. Results of oversight: captures the public attention with congressional investigations. The Watergate and Iran-Contra affairs are examples where they made a huge deal of bringing these people in and questioning them and trying to get to the bottom of something. We see it kind of sort of now with the investigation into Kavanaugh with the Senate Judiciary Committee. They're questioning them. That's probably not really oversight, but it's another example of them bringing people in and questioning them. Okay, and then lastly, oversight has increased, particularly with the budget and as a result of divided government. What does that mean? Well, budgets are going up. There's more money than ever being spent on these agencies, so we want to keep them in check there. And divided government is when it's, we have a president that's from one party and the Congress controlled by a different party. Right now, we don't have divided government, although our government is pretty split for other reasons. Okay, please watch this so that we can do some other stuff in class on Monday. I hope everybody had a great weekend and a good homecoming.